Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Leadership from the Heart. Today we have Sam Sapp, a man of faith, a husband, a father, and a business owner with over 15 years in tech. Started with hacking game consoles, Sam has spent the last 8 years supporting small businesses and running his own business for the last 5. Helping companies drive growth in tech, he's passionate about combining his expertise with his personal values to help businesses thrive. You can learn a lot more about him at lockbot.com, but let's start with Sam's journey. Sam, how are you? Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me. That was a fantastic read-in. That was beautiful.
Thanks. Appreciate that. So, Sam, we chatted a little bit before the podcast, which I always love to do with my guests, especially since it's the first time we're meeting. And you've been in tech, and I definitely want to get into tech, being that we're in a whole new sphere of AI and tech taking over the world, and everyone's running scared. But I kind of wanted to start with this idea of challenges in leadership. And you said you've been an owner for about 5 years. I think there's a little bit more behind that. But can you talk to us about any challenges you faced when you first started and how you overcame those challenges?
Yeah, so I think some of the bigger challenges for me in general, in kind of my business, but then in the business in the past, is I've always wanted a little bit more of a transparent leadership model. And it's unfair. On one hand, I think it's unfair to former leaders to say I didn't have that. On the other hand, I think it is fair to say the way I wanted it and the way I wanted to perpetrate it, so to speak, I didn't have quite clearly modeled to me. So finding exactly how transparent I want to be to my team, because I also want to protect them, right? So there's one of the, I had a conversation with a business keynote speaker the other day, and my question was to him was, hey, what's kind of the happy medium? Because I think a lot of leaders in earnest try to protect their team from some of the difficult decisions that have had to been made, or some of the example I gave him was, we have to achieve this goal or our department is going to get cut. Does the leader tell the team the department is going to get cut? And as an owner, that is, I mean, you have direct access to the financials, the good, the bad, and the ugly. There's some days where maybe you didn't want to show up. And it's kind of one of those things where if you're adopting radical transparency, that's fantastic. But there eventually is a line, right? It's not like maybe you tell your team, oh, I didn't want to wake up this morning, but I'm here anyway. Or maybe you do, right? Maybe you end up in this difficult conversation where that's relevant. And so you have to shoot straight. And so I think some of the bigger difficulties for me as a leader has been trying to strike that balance between being as radically transparent as I possibly can, while at the same time helping the team to maintain focus and trying to potentially save them from some of the more difficult things that just don't need to be in the way.
Yeah. And so how do you find that balance? Because I definitely agree with you that there's a line. I'm a super transparent leader, probably to a fault. Find that going over the line from time to time is also okay. I feel like it's a dance. What do you think?
I agree. I mean, dance is a great way to put it. I think if I ever failed, it's typically being more transparent, and it's
Sure.
typically having, and then that's where I kind of have a gut check, right? Where and it's like, well, you said this, and then I have to like, oh, well, that was 3 months ago, and we're past that. I'm sorry, I didn't update on the victory or whatever. And so it is a dance for sure. And I'd say if I err on any side, it's typically on the more transparent. But I also think that's rewarded me in that I have a team that I trust. And when they go out there and they get it done, despite the circumstances, I know they're doing it aware of the circumstances. And
1000%.
it means they have buy-in to the mission, which is the most humbling thing I think any leader can experience when they allow themselves to.
100%. I've been coaching on this more recently that, I find that some leaders have never had a vision and seen it through. But once you do, it's exhilarating. It becomes your purpose. because having people come together and put your vision to life, whatever it may be, uh, with the blood, sweat, and tears is definitely something very cool to witness, and even cooler to have seen done on your behalf alongside you. It's very humbling. So thank you for that. I appreciate that. So right now you're the sole business owner, right?
Yes. Yep. Yep.
Okay,
It's me and the team.
perfect. Has there been a time, and I know the answer to this is why I'm fronting it. Has there been a time where there's been a partner, and in that partnership, what challenges did you guys face? How much do you tell each other? How upfront and honest? And I think more importantly, what lessons did you learn in that partnership that you can take with you, maybe in the next one, but more importantly, in your life?
So it's an interesting thing. The appeal behind the partnership then, and now that I'm kind of 5+ years past it, the siren song almost, so to speak, to go back to, is the idea that you have somebody as bought in physically, mentally, and as spiritually as you are. At least that's the theory. And I had worked in tech, as you mentioned, for 15 years, I guess 10 at the time. And I knew I was an engineer, and I knew I wanted to kind of start my own thing or become more in charge of my own destiny, so to speak. And the appeal, it was almost kind of, it felt like destiny and fate and God, if you will, working. And I still think there's some truth to that. I just wish I had known the lesson he had in store for me, because I went into it, I had some degree of capital and savings, and we ended up actually selling our home, bought into the whole dream. He had been in business for some time as the owner, and the theory was that he had a good sales and marketing, and that was what he presented himself. And I believe he did have a very outgoing and boisterous, that was kind of his proclivity, was sales and marketing. And since I was more tech operations and loved the idea of getting more into business operations, which I had had some exposure to, we agreed to kind of partner up. And he had an existing business that he agreed to part with about 50% of. And that was a violent roller coaster that lasted maybe 8 months. That in the peak of a depressing morning, I do remember not wanting to get out of bed. Actually, the only thing that did get me out of bed was one of the team members said, I'm behind on my mortgage, and if I don't make a payment today, I'm going to lose the home. And if you could find some way to get me $600. And I didn't know how to get $600, but I was like, I'm going to get out of bed now, and I'm going to find out how to get $600 to this guy so he can keep his home. And there was an ultimatum or two in there. There was some unethical behavior and distracting behavior, and at some point I kind of basically had to say, hey, I've got a wife, I have a home, of course we're selling it, I'm bought into this thing, some of this stuff needs to stop, or I'm going to have to formally exit. And it continued. This was a God moment for sure. I ran into an old business partner of his that I didn't know, and he basically helped me realize that the gentleman didn't mind stealing from the company and hiding money away. And when I found it, that was the moment for me where I was like, okay, well, I already given him ultimatum, but transparently, when you are so bought in like that, it's kind of difficult. It's like, well, do I go through with the ultimatum? Like, I mean, I made it pretty black and white, but, and this was my opinion. So this is, all right, my opinion at the time was to approach business like an investor. When you invest in something, a stock or a person or otherwise, right? If you're in the valley, you haven't actually lost any money. Like on paper, sure, it's like, well, we've lost thousands, we've lost millions, but that's only true if you
You sell.
sell at the bottom. And so I had this notion, and I'd sold my wife on this notion that this is just the valley. A year or two from now, we're going to be at the tip of the rocket, and if we sell it all, we'll sell then, and the valley will be a distant memory. So now, I've given an ultimatum. And I'm stuck with the notion of, do I sell? Do I get out? And until his former partner walked in and made it clear to me that he was all out taking money from the company and lying to me about it, that's when it was like, okay, well, that we have to get out. There's, I mean, there's no way around that sort of things. Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty deep, you know. I think if obviously if you're in a partnership, you're expecting to have exactly just that, right? A partnership. And when somebody's taking money without letting the other party know, that's a pretty deep betrayal in business, you know,
Yeah.
specifically when you have an employee who's asking for $600 so that he doesn't lose his house. Pressure is a privilege, but that's some deep pressure there. So what lessons did you learn in that you take forward with you throughout, you know, the other 5 years? I don't know how long it's been, but since then.
That's where I still think there's some design behind it. I learned a lot, actually, a lot of stuff, good and bad, mostly bad, but I learned some good. So, for example, he had a good relationship with a small local bank. And I very much am pretty passionate about the fact that I think most people, when they think bank, they think big conglomerate that isn't going to care about them, which there might be some truth in as a small business. But if you walk in, there are banks out there still that have 1, 2, 3 branches, family owned. And if you walk into them, they're going to remember your name. They're going to know what you're doing in business. And the fact that they loaned you money at all means that they have some investment in your business and your interest in your success. And in business, I think or at leadership in general, one of the better things we can do for ourselves is surround ourselves with people where we're interested in their success just as much as they're interested in ours. And if you can do that in every facet, including who you have your checking account with, then all the
Ooh,
better.
that's good. That's really good. Have you learned to alchemize those quote unquote bad lessons to drive you forward in a better way?
Yes. Oh, man. I mean, for sure. But interestingly enough, these last few years have been a little bit of, how do I deprogram some of the potential trauma and PTSD? Like because so for example, me and a friend, we're sole business owners. If we have bad history with partners, we'll preach from the pulpit all day long on why you should be a sole business owner until the day you die. But I have met ample people that
Sure.
have had amazing partnerships. Another friend of mine, he had a 50-50 split. They met each other at church. They built a beautiful business. They sold it at 50 people, and they've done multiple businesses since.
Right.
And so what's been important to me is kind of revisiting a little bit with a bit of an open mind on, okay, just because this is me doesn't mean it's everyone. And then asking them in earnest, my friend's Jim is his name. Hey, Jim, how did you and your partner do it? What were some of the ways that you think you held it together? And it's interesting because these aren't complicated tricks they talk about, but once you internalize it, you're like, oh, that's something me and my partner didn't have. It seems
Sure.
easy enough now and obvious when you say it. So, for example, he said, we each had veto rights. We would rarely pull them out. But if at any point we were worried that a decision was going to be unethical or immoral, or it wasn't something, a direction we should go, we were allowed to exercise our veto rights and we wouldn't move forward with it, period. So you were either all in, everybody was, or all out.
Right.
And when you say it, it's like, man, that sounds so obvious now. But I mean, how many times did I not veto, or he didn't veto, or we were doing something half-heartedly because the other person thought it was a good idea, but we didn't think it was a good idea?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good advice. I feel like partnership in business is almost like dating in real life, right? Dating for marriage, because you do need to get to know their values and what they stand for and what they don't stand for and all the beautiful things before you enter this, you know, again, partnership for with less on the line than a true, you know, relationship, romantic relationship. But nonetheless, I mean, money is a big part of life. And so when you have money on the line, that's pretty deep. So I like the fact that Jim came up with those simple yet profound ways to have a good partnership.
One of my favorite angel investor presentations that I visited back in the day was Angel Investing, a marriage with planned divorce.
Yep.
And I think we fail to realize sometimes that sooner or later there will be an exit at some point, either by one of the partners or both of the partners or the original investor, or that was the whole goal to begin with. It's like, well, we were going to build it and then sell it. Like that was the point.
Yeah,
And so it's important to think as you're going into it what the other side looks like.
for sure, for sure, for sure. So switching gears a little bit, let's go into some tech stuff.
Yeah.
We've been in tech for 15 years. Tell me about that. What does that look like? What part of tech? Because I know
I
there's different dimensions.
If I could volunteer to have one of my eyes replaced with technology, I'd probably be one of the early ones in the line. Maybe not the first, but probably the early ones in the line. I just have always, I shouldn't say always. It really started with the love of Legos and building blocks and designing things and building things. And then somewhere around the Windows XP era, and I got a hold of a computer, and turns out building things in a virtual environment is way more affordable, so to speak, than, a bunch of different Lego sets. And, it was a modest income family. So I would design and tweak and break. And, I love and respect my mom to death, but I also had a healthy respect and fear for her. Anytime I would break the computer, it was kind of a race to fix it before I told her. I was an honest
Sure.
person. I would tell her, but it was important for me to fix it before. And so just between that and everything else, and then we had a family friend and I called them up. And so I've done programming and hacking and design and tear down and build up, and it's been, and it is still a deep-seated joy to play with a computer.
That's super cool, dude. I love that. Like hacking game consoles. I was just like, wow, all right, that's another level for sure.
Yeah, I just do it for the fun of it. You play these video games and you tweak some things around, and next thing you know, you're going through walls. And it was a fun way to rehash an old video game.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty dope. Where does this fear of tech come from for people?
It's the unknown. It's 100% the unknown. We fear the unknown. And that's, I think, a relatively universal human trait. We're on this island. Let's take from Moana for a second.
Yeah.
We're on this island. We know this island. It's a good island. Why would we venture outside of this island? And I think sooner or later, even if we're not there now, I think we all get there. Sooner or later with age, we all get a little bit more conservative and careful. And technology at the rate of its growth is pretty much always 100% unknown. I mean, AI is kind of the buzzword right now. I was literally talking to a friend. I'm optimistic, but if you were to ask me which direction it would go, good or bad, I'd tell you it's probably a flip of the coin right now. A lot of
Sure.
my tech friends are like, oh, we need to do this and we need to do that and we need to. And my opinion, and again, I am optimistic, but my opinion is legitimately we open Pandora's box. There's no closing it. And what's happening next is, I think, at this point, just as much up to chance as it is human intervention.
Yeah, it's using it for good, right? I was on a podcast with somebody recently and he said, technology is not here to take over. It's here to enhance our human experience. And I was just like, wow, that's pretty dope.
It is. Some of my favorite shorts, they've talked about what if instead of viewing the iPad and the social media as this evil thing, we viewed it as a literal extension of our human being. I've got thumbs, I've got fingers, I have this device that allows me access to any human on the planet for the most part.
Yeah, and then we can use it for good.
We sure can.
Yeah. So why shouldn't people be scared? Is it because of looking at it with that perspective? Like if I was a business owner, I am a business owner, but if I was nervous about adopting something new, what would be your, I don't know, your, maybe not your
Well, that's a good
convincing,
one. That's a good one. So it's important for me in this moment to realize I need to stress the importance of balance.
Yes.
I am headfirst your typical business owner, let's adopt the new and exciting thing, which I think a lot of folks are. But the IT consultant in me also says spending just a couple minutes to maybe read some of the fine print and digest whose best interest this company, because it's on top of it being an app, it is a company. There is a company back there that hired developers somewhere in the world, and each person has their own independent agenda. This isn't some technology that built itself yet that is totally interested in you. And so I think if more people and more businesses were to just spend that 5 to 10 minutes to kind
Right.
of like, okay, is this company, is this app right for me? And then go head first into it. So you're asking on the optimistic side, like, why should we be optimistic? I mean, at the end of the day, technology is beautiful and it continues to simplify our lives. And especially in business, I have seen the right technology significantly increase effectiveness. I mean, they say literally dual monitors is like a 50% increase in effectiveness. And there are still ample firms out there that just have one monitor and an additional monitor. You're talking like $125, and you're going to increase the effectiveness of your team. And in over a 90 percentile case study, your team loves it. There was
Right.
not a single member interviewed that was like, I hate
I
the
hate
two
dual monitors.
monitors. Yeah.
For sure. I think that that's a really good takeaway, in that some leaders just continue to believe that the old way, right, the way we've always done business is the right way. And something as simple as two monitors, even if the illusion, even if it was just an illusion, the fact that your people like it and it gives them the perception that they're more productive, that's why you get two monitors, right? It's just that simple. I like that. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think we all intuitively digest if we hire a good carpenter and then hand them a flathead screwdriver and say, nail this
Hmm.
thing with that you have two people, right? You either hired the person that they don't care, they're just getting paid, in which case, sure, they're going to do that. But the person that came into carpentry for a love of carpentry is going to quit.
Yep.
And yet, for some reason, we don't extend that to the laptop and monitors we have in front of us. And I can relate to that because even in my own life as a tech person that lives and breathes this, the first example I gave seems more relevant or relatable than the second example. So I think it's a human thing, but we really need to get our heads around the notion that our A players want to be able to perform at peak capacity. And if they're being held back for one reason or another, they're not going to stick around.
Yeah. As an operator myself, I help businesses as well with like decluttering and really streamlining. Lean Six
Yeah.
is my jam. So,
Well, that's a good one.
oh, I love that stuff. How often do you see business owners being less productive because of this concept of manual is better? And how do you help them? What is it exactly that your business does when they're introduced to a new client?
Manual is better. Okay, I'm trying to think through. Okay, so typically what we see a decent bit of actually is us living in tech. While a lot of what we do is the day-to-day operations, so you think laptop setups, help desk, networking, cybersecurity. That's all our whole thing is let's keep you operational and safe. But we do a lot of consulting as part of that. And a lot of what we tend to see is depending on the size and scale and where you're at. Some businesses, they have the type of owners that you kind of do this intuitively. It's like, hey, I have 5 apps. I feel like these should play together in some way. Why are we downloading from one, uploading to another, re-entering the data 5 times? Some owners, like they're already in that space, and then they engage us. But some owners, and these are typically the ones that are used to doing it manually. These are the carpenters, these are the
Yeah.
builders,
The
these are
trades.
the like,
Yeah.
right. Those folks, they're used to doing it manually. They're used to working with the tools that they have, right? I mean, it would be nice if this super cool tool existed, but it doesn't exist. And so we're working with the tools that we have. Those are the ones that, we typically kind of get to do a little bit more consulting from the perspective of, hey, that's true, but also there is a world where we get in like a good application developer. They develop a little bit of automation, and then these 3 apps that you're having the multiple entry into are playing well together.
Yeah.
So, and once you do that, I mean, you significantly save time. But again, it's all about the owner. So we have some of them, like the more financially inclined ones, like, so there's a private equity backed, and their whole thing is, it's like one of their early realizations is they're losing about 5 hours per day in manpower from random tech problems. And then it's like, okay, well, what's going on in tech? And then it's like, well, we need kind of a big picture solution. So they have the breakdown to the financials of the loss of data behind a poorly implemented technology strategy. But not everybody thinks like that. The person that started the business, that's been in the business, I'm the son of the business owner, and we've been doing it this way for 100 years, and we built it from scratch, and we never had a technology vision then. Why do we need it now? And I don't even think, nobody really thinks, why do we need it now? It's just one of those things where it's like, I built this way, and of all the infinitesimal problems I have, because as an owner, it does seem to be pretty infinite, why is technology the one I focus on today?
And I'd say, I'm going to do some quick math here. I'd say it's definitely because 5 hours a day times,
Yeah, let's
20.
just take like a 10-person team, right? That's a pretty decent
Exactly.
size firm.
Exactly. So that 2080 for, every day, it's 104,000, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why you invest in tech, right? And it's those people, to your point, that you don't need to tell them much, because they get it, right? They've done the time study to know how much time it's taking. But the reason why we invest in tech, and the reason why we streamline and optimize processes, is for time. Time is one of the only, if only the commodity that you'll never get back, And so the reason why you go to it is because of time for you and time for your people, so you can focus on doing other things. So that's
So
cool.
in this, there's one other tip I would want to give people, and it is kind of weird and freaky, because as a consultant, I want to be like, trust us. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying you shouldn't, but I am saying there's more often than I would like that we bring on a client for some unrelated reason, and we find out that there's never been a backup strategy. And we have run into firms that have unfortunately learned the hard way that their invoicing system wasn't backed up, and they got hit with something, and they need to rebuild all the invoices that they had outstanding for the last however long they had outstanding invoices, which, depending on the business, I mean, you might have an invoice sitting there that you're trying to collect on from a year or two ago. And if worst case scenario, you're in some legal thing, and now you need to try to rebuild that from memory and emails and everything else. And then you need to try to still enforce that if you're involved in a legal thing. So anyway, it's just
Yeah.
one of those things where it's, don't be afraid. Even if you have a tech consulting company, I frankly kind of like these questions a lot, because it holds my feet to the fire and it makes the customer informed. Sometimes the customer, you have the conversation in the initial, right? You're like,
Hmm.
hey, how often are you going to take backups, blah, blah, blah. But then you haven't reviewed that strategy. So then 2 years, 3 years later, all I'm saying is, you don't want to get hit and find out the hard way that you do a backup once a month and you're
For
going to have to
sure.
go a month back.
For sure. So how often do you recommend backups?
Oh, you should at least, it's easy enough anymore to do a daily thing rolled up into a weekly thing, rolled up into a monthly thing. And it really depends on the size of the business and their willingness to take on liability for cost. So obviously in like a massive business, you're probably not going to want to go back an hour, but
Right.
also you're going to have to pay a lot more for a more thorough backup strategy to try to make that sort of a thing possible. If you're in a big enough business, you don't want to go down at all. So you want
Yeah.
two of everything, basically.
Yeah. So looking at the future and thinking about where tech is going, potentially, what advice do you have for us as leaders, as operators, as small business? Like, what would you tell us?
Ooh, looking at the future, what would I tell small business owners and leaders? That's an interesting one. Have a plan. Have a plan. And your plan doesn't have to be enacted instantly and it doesn't have to be expensive, but have a plan. And I think that will help you significantly in business. And then as the plan becomes more complex and you need more help, find the help.
And what does a plan look like?
A plan looks like, what kind of antivirus are we using? What kind of
Sure.
cybersecurity solution do we have? What kind of backups? Are we in an industry that needs a lot of compliance or a little compliance? And even if it's a little compliance, you should still have a little compliance. And when are we going to worry more about this and less about this? Because I've run into larger organizations that are not taking care of our personal health records like I would like.
We don't need to get into that. That's wild. What is your favorite part of leadership, being a leader yourself?
Ooh, I love seeing people develop in front of me and become just better. And it is somehow fulfilling for me to see somebody else start off. And in tech, it is so much fun. It is a lot of fun because in my humble opinion, the person that loves solving puzzles is the type of person that makes a great technician. And so you can get somebody that has near no tech experience but likes puzzles, and then in even just a year's time they'll outperform somebody with a master's degree in tech because they liked puzzles. And to see them, the light in their eye when they realize they also love tech
Mhm.
because they love puzzles, and tech is just a lot of puzzles, it's a pretty exciting thing to me.
That's pretty cool. I've never thought of it that way, but yeah, I think would you say solving puzzles is like troubleshooting?
Yeah, that's exactly what I view it as. It's troubleshooting. And there's so much tech that, between Windows or Mac or a Linux operating system, those are ones and zeros at the bottom, but on the surface it's still about what command am I running or what button am I clicking or what. And it takes an intuitive kind of puzzle problem solver to almost kind of get a thrill about the fact that they're in a completely foreign environment and sometimes they're racing against the clock to solve it.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's like a misconception out there, maybe it's not a misconception, that tech guys or that IT guys are introverts and don't necessarily love people. They love the machine, right? How do you help that person who needs to now lead a group of people lead?
Whoa, how do we help slight so you're saying in the stereotypical kind of introverted tech, how do we transition them to more of a leadership role? Am I getting that
Correct.
right?
That's
That
correct.
is a beautiful question. I believe the coolest thing about leadership is owning up to and doing what you say you're going to do, leading by example, taking on some of the difficult stuff. I think probably the biggest difficulty for that role, on top of like accountability and all this other stuff, but I think one of the bigger difficulties for that role would be making it obvious some of the things that you're doing, almost turning a spotlight on yourself, right? But even just as simple as a I was here until midnight last night, working on this thing, uh, because XYZ, can you guys have a look at, I think can go a long way. So I would say just don't be afraid to kind of speak up on the things that you are doing for the team and to help the team. Because I think in tech, especially, and if you have the right team,
Yeah.
I don't know how much, hopefully, they're looking at you and saying, if they can be here till midnight the night before doing this, I can stay an extra hour tonight to make sure
I
that
do
doesn't
that.
happen again.
Right. Right. So it's a form of communication for sure. I like it a lot. I'm just trying to wrap my head around what I would call it because I always need to call it something. But I like that a lot. I think that's a big miss, not only in the introverts, but just telling people what you're doing, just telling people where you're at. I think that's a good one.
And I think we all struggle with communication. So, like,
Yeah.
props to the supposed introvert. There's a question. So, we have a series of questions we ask in interviews. And if I could count how often I hear communication improvement is
Hmm.
what they
Number
want
one.
to focus on, I'd be very well off. Easily like 1 in 3, it seems like.
Yeah.
And the other 2 are something different that they want to work on. So don't be afraid to work on that, knowing that we all struggle with it.
Yeah. Yeah, and leadership is almost like a puzzle too, right? You're solving different problems all the time, right? There's a different way to communicate with every single person on your team, and if you can see it as a game that this all is anyway, I think that you could find ways that make it fun for yourself. It doesn't have to be, it's hard already, so don't make it harder. But yeah, I like what you said about just telling people what you're going through and where you're at. I think a lot of us just hold that in and then it becomes resentment. And they should just know when people don't know, and that's including me, right? I got to do better at that. What is your favorite app and why?
What is my favorite app? Wow, that's a pretty good one. I thoroughly enjoy what ChatGPT is doing. I find myself kind of coming to it again and again. For those that don't know, they did this setting at one point. If you download the cell phone app, you can
Mhm.
now talk to ChatGPT and it can view your camera and it can give you recommendations on like your environment. Like, hey, what kind of picture would go well on this wall, and it'll in a very natural way. Yeah, so I had on 2 different glasses, and for giggles, to show the person I was talking to, I pulled up ChatGPT, I pulled up the camera, and I was like, this set of glasses or this set of glasses, and it just goes, I think these glasses make you much more refined, and I'm like, there you go. So, and then literally the other person helping me was like, I actually like those glasses better too. I wasn't going to say anything, but since, the robot, I was like, well, there you go.
That is cool, dude. I did not know that. I have the app on my phone, but it goes back to just using it traditionally. I am definitely going to check that out today. Um, wow. That's a good answer and a good reason why I did not know they made those enhancements. But ChatGPT is where they're going with it is definitely.
It is wild to me the pace at which this particular technology is going. And
Yeah.
it is only becoming more accessible, and I am really excited. I'm really
Yeah.
excited about it because I don't know what tomorrow holds, and that's, I think, part of the excitement.
Yeah.
My job might be gone tomorrow.
No, they'll always need people like you. I mean, you
I
know
like to think
why?
so.
I think it's because, like, no matter what, right? Even myself, I find myself to be a little techie, but even when I use ChatGPT to explain to me how to do something, I'm still like, I need an expert. You know what I mean? Like, I know I can probably walk through it, but there's probably going to be something that I miss, and I just need someone that because you can't beat out experience. No matter what, whatever degree you have, experience is always the most cost effective and efficient way to go.
And
In
right
my
now, it
in my
is
opinion.
definitely not confrontational. It does not have a backbone. I frankly, half the arguments I have with ChatGPT are, will you tell me I'm wrong, darn it? Like, I'm pretty sure I don't have the right strategy here. I understand that's what I told you, but I'm hoping you're going to come back and be like, no, that's the dumbest play ever.
For sure, right? And that, to your point, right? I ask it to shoot holes in my theories as well. And it always finds a way. It's like a really good best friend that's always going to amp you up and be your cheerleader. It's always going to find a
Yes.
way to like
Yeah.
make you right, which is kind of scary,
It
but yeah, that's
certainly is. The moment you give it a plan, it wants to like, oh, that's a really good one. And here's why that's a really good plan. You're like, I'm gonna start a business and I'm gonna, sell paper clips to people.
yeah.
I love that. You're gonna make so much money.
Here's what the average person that sells paper clips makes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. What is your favorite leadership quote? We're going to end with.
Oh, favorite leadership quote. Lately, I've been using an old mentor would say, perfection is the enemy of progress. And for some reason, even though I'm pretty good at that, I'm typically just the just start person. But I think what it is I'm kind of starting to mentor and talk to more folks and try to help those that are maybe on year one, because I can still very much relate to year one. That one just comes true again and again and again for me. It's a perfected plan that never comes to fruition.
Right. Because it always needs
Is
tweaking, right?
It sure does.
Yeah. And what's your go-to leadership book or just book?
Somebody told me How to Win Friends and Influence People, but Dale Carnegie was basically the root of all business books. And when I bothered to read it, I was like, oh, I see what he's saying. Yeah. Half of these books are like one chapter straight out of How to Win Friends and Influence People. And one of his good friends said, I did not like that he named it that because influence people sounds manipulative, and the book is basically just how to be a good person.
Yeah.
And I would 100% agree with that.
Yeah, somebody told me that persuasion and manipulation is all about intent. And I said, that's a really nice way to put it.
Yeah. I'll give you two, though. I want to give you another one because
let's go.
There's How to Get Rich by Felix Dennis is such a fun book because it's similar to How to Win Friends and Influence People in that there's so much meat on the bone.
How to Get Rich
by Felix Dennis. Nobody talks about that one. I saw it in a short. It's the only reason I looked it up. And I think part of the reason nobody talks about it is because he doesn't market it. He says, he's like, I'm not going to market this book. I don't care. I got really, really, really rich. To put this in perspective, he says if you are worth between 1 and 10 million pounds, so this would have been, just think 5 to 20 million at the time of his writing, you are comfortably poor.
Wow.
He did the Maxim magazines. He did magazines when magazines were really, really popular. And he did magazines in the United Kingdom and in the US. So I think he did. And he started it off bootstrapping it in a leaky building, convincing a lot of people to give him a shot and somehow making it all happen.
Love those people, man. Love those stories. It just takes such courage. You said you wanted to give me two more. That was one.
No. That was those two
second?
total. I'll give you books all day long. I like reading. So if you want more books, I'll give you more books. But those are the two big ones for me, I think.
Yeah. Reading is definitely.
I've been reading a lot of Patrick Lencioni lately.
Yo, that guy.
I did. I had a few people say, and for some reason it took me way too long to start reading his books. I haven't read a bad one yet. Motive was the first one. Now I'm on Advantage. Just good books. Yeah. And easy to understand and follow.
Right. Good storylines, just the whole thing. It's very applicable. So where can people find you, Sam?
Lockbot.com, you nailed that one. I'm on LinkedIn, Sam Sapp. I'm the only one with flames before and after my name because I like flames. I've been asked once or twice if that means something, and it's like, it means I'm a kid and I want flames on my before and after my name. So you can connect with me there. I love meeting folks. And then I'm on Facebook. My Facebook is open too, Sam Sapp, and Instagram, it's InstaSamCan. And so, yeah. Any one of those. And then if you don't mind, I've got a podcast. I'll plug that too.
Plug it on.
GroundZeroGrowth.com.
What's that podcast about?
It's about starting and growing and the growth moments in business. At the end of the day, we've all got a journey and a dream. Some of us are further along than others. and we've all struggled and grown.
Yes, that's good. That's really good. Thank you for that, Sam. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate our conversation. A lot of good nuggets in there, specifically for me, which is always selfishly why my episodes, I love them so much because I learn a lot from them and from different people. So I appreciate you being here today. Thank you for your time.
Love what you're doing, Romie. Thank you.
Thank you. And that, everybody, is our episode of Leadership from the Heart. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe and share if you found this podcast to be helpful. And go follow Sam. He's got a lot of good tech advice, and he's going places. And I love the fact that you're helping business owners where they need it and you're meeting them where they're at. So thank you so much for that. And we'll tune in next time for another episode of Leadership from the Heart.